Can I kick it? Yes, you can. Can I kick it? What's up, y'all? I might as well go ahead and knock this out. I got my notes right here, so might as well knock this out. Get ready for this basketball game. I'm a Golden State Warriors fan, um, so I wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about women in hip hop. Um, and actually, the next two lectures are going to be about women in hip hop. This one is more about the history. And so the women's roles and sort of contributions in the history of hip hop, right? So as we talked about before, hip hop, right, roots in the Bronx in the late 1970s, emerged to a global phenomenon. It currently influences everything, right, from music to fashion, TV, film, etc., right, so, and social media, obviously. But when we, generally talk about hip hop, we're talking about the iconic brothers, the Godfathers, Grandmaster Flash and Cool Herc and Run DMC, and, people like Africa Bambaataa, people like that, KRS-One, like I mentioned, right? And some of them you've seen, right, in the Hall of Fame the other day, right? So, but, let me just take about 30 minutes here to talk about women who have been integral into the shaping of the sound, the business, and the culture of hip hop. So I'll kind of take you on a journey, if you will, of about 4 decades, right? A little bit more than 4 decades of hip hop history, kind of focusing in on the sort of the various roles that women have played: rappers, MCs, producers, label owners, working behind the scenes, DJs, um, you know, trend makers, dancers, right? Video vixens, right? All these kind of folk that have pretty much elevated hip hop from especially in the early '90s through now, right? So I want you to make sure you're taking notes. There's a series of questions I'm going to ask you later to consider. But so women have been active in the early days, right? One of the earliest women that, excuse me, one of the earliest women that you will um, see or hear about is Roxanne Shante, right? Roxanne Shante. And she was a teenager in the mid 80s, right? Um, she was central to kind of the battle, the Roxanne Wars, right? Um, and a rap group back in that time called UTFO, right? Had a song called Roxanne, Roxanne, I want to be your man. And that kind of thing, right? So you look it up, UTFO, just like it's spelled, right? And they had a song called Roxanne, Roxanne. And Roxanne's kind and Shantae's kind of bold and fearless battle rap style, kind of really threw in the face the idea of women as being timid or less skilled, right? And I think that she was one of the first women to sort of give girls a sense of that they have a role to play in the culture. One, and then two, that they actually can grab the mic like we did the other day, right? They can grab the mic and defend their lyrical prowess as well. MC Light is another name, right? 1988, her Light is a Rock album, right? 1988, Light is a Rock was the first solo female rapper to drop a full length album, right? So MC Light was the first female rapper to drop a full album. If you don't know her, look her up, listen to her a little bit. She is still a very confident sister, clear enunciation of of her words, very sharp lyricism. She wasn't sweet talking. She was powerful, right? A projected authority, and made people take her seriously in the industry, right? And obviously, historically, when we talk about female rap success, we have to talk about Salt and Pepper, right? They were a group formed in the '80s. Hits like Push It, push it real good. Dun, 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 right. One of the classic dance songs of history, right? They were very accessible, round-the-way New York girls, had universal appeal, unapologetically female, had the bamboo earrings, the colorful clothing. They created, party anthems. They created safe sex conversation. Talked about, men that they liked and the stuff they wanted to do with the brothers. Having a respect for women. Salt and Pepper was crucial in the history of hip hop. And I think the last person that I'll talk about the history, obviously, who's still engaged in pop culture today, especially in movies, is Queen Latifah, right? She comes around late 80s. Um, she considered herself a socially conscious sister. Her lyrics, her messages of empowerment, songs like Ladies First, UNITY, Who You Calling a Bitch, stuff like that, right? She kind of inspired a lot of Afrocentric clothing and Afrocentric, African inspired fashions, right? To sort of undergird or kind of sort of hold down her reputation as being a strong woman, proud woman, sort of a beacon of sort of African strength, and that inspired many women and brothers alike, right? So if we talk about those four, so in your notes you should have, or just thinking about those four for this short lecture to start off with, throughout history, Roxanne Shante, MC Light, Salt and Pepper, Queen Latifah, and that's just a fraction, a small part of the foundation of hip hop in the 80s, right? And they all faced an industry, right, that wasn't really down with the sisters in terms of having them in the lead, right? But they forged ahead, and this is sort of they proved that female agency and female lyricism was both formidable, but also can yield commercial success, right? I wanted to kind of spend some time a little bit on producers, right? Women and producers and label owners, right? Behind the microphone, behind in the studio, women played a vital role as well in the business side of hip hop, right? Sylvia Robinson is an important name to know, right? Sylvia Robinson, maybe some people call her the mother of hip hop, right? She was the founder of Sugar Hill Records, right? And Sugar Hill Records was the was the label responsible for releasing one of the most popular hits of hip hop history, "Rapper's Delight" by the Sugar Hill Gang, and that was 1979. People call the "Rapper's Delight" maybe the first commercially successful hip hop songs in history. Sylvia Robinson, her business sort of strength and savvy took over hip hop and sort of engaged in, sort of pushed her and hip hop into national radio play. But of course, she too faced sexism and even, sort of skepticism on whether or not she could run a business, right? Um, at a time in the 70s and 80s, um, and in an industry, the music industry, that was highly male dominant, undervalued women in executive roles as well. But sort of she kind of proved that she could do her thing. Another person, so you have Sylvia Robinson. Another person is Mona Scott Young. Mona is very interesting, right? Her biggest thing is obviously the Love and Hip Hop series, right? She is the founder of that, um, of the Mona Me Entertainment. But she's responsible for Missy Elliott, even people like Usher, even other people, others are hip hop, right? But like Missy, for instance, um, she then obviously created the Love and Hip Hop series, and she is one of the most powerful folk in hip hop history, right behind the scenes. Speaking of Love and Hip Hop, like quite frankly, Deb Antony, right? If y'all watch Love and Hip Hop, Deb Antony, uh, um, and she's been fundamentally responsible for people like Gucci Mane. She was Gucci Mane's manager, and she ushered in people like Nicki Minaj, French Montana, and Deb. She's powerful, and you know who Deb's son is, right? Right. If y'all watch the shows, y'all know who Deb's son is, and so Deb Antony is an important person too, right? As a female executive, she sort of organizes tours, secures press, negotiates contracts, all the stuff that managers do. But she's been the manager of some big, 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 big names, right? And even though we think of her as a rapper only, somebody like a Missy Elliott, I like to sort of call kind of a behind the scenes heavyweight as well. Like Missy's influence just like is huge, right? I mean, it's much more than a microphone. Like, yeah, she's sort of responsible for the, super duper fly, that kind of stuff, right? Her futuristic rap style or videos, all that stuff is wow, right? Watch a Missy video, right? You just see, please watch a Missy video. I don't know if I have that question on there or not, but it just see her futurism, her colors, her use of technology is kind of cool. But she also is a writer, right? She wrote songs for Aaliyah. Her and Aaliyah was tight. She's responsible for a lot of the songs that Sierra put out there. So she is, a master of visual artistry, one, but also beat making and songwriting, right? So I think again, if we do this stuff in fours, somebody like a Sylvia Robinson, a Mona Scott Young, Deb Antony, and Missy Elliott are also proof that female expertise, I would just say, sort of extends even beyond the microphone because they design business strategies, they artist development, um, production, and beat making, and they are and were crucially responsible for the sound of hip hop, the character, the sonic character, if you will, right? And although their stories are often kind of overshadowed by the brothers, to be able, I would have been remiss if I made it through this semester. Not just because we got more women in class than men, but just more so because they're an important aspect of hip hop, right? We had a few women DJs too. Like, I mean, before rappers kind of dominated the spotlight, the DJ, as we talked about before, the DJ was the foundation, and they provided the break beats, and they provided the groove, and they set the stage for MCs to flow, right? And so for a long time, when you think of a party DJ or even a studio DJ, you thought of brothers, but there came a time where people like Spinderella from Salt and Pepper. Spinderella was important, right? Um, and she was one of the ones that got the most attention, right? She was scratching. She orchestrated the show. The technical aspects that she kind of got down with it. Jazzy Joyce, right? Somebody you should look up if you want to know a little bit about that history. Um, you know, very popular in the club. Coco Chanel, still kind of engaged a little bit. Or also, and the sister that the Black Girls Rock. Um, ah, Black Bond. DJ Bond. Look that up for me. Well, I'll look it up when it's over. But DJ Bond. She's a DJ, but she's the founder of Black Girls Rock, right? And she empowered like black women and girls in media and music, right? So like women like that, and countless others that may not have had set the big stage, right? But kind of confronted the obstacles. Not didn't have much mentoring opportunities, and many thought that they couldn't handle the demands of you know, and not only the demands, physical demands, crate crate of sort of crate calling and but also the technical demands of DJing, right? But a lot of these sisters had loyal followings and were able to kind of do some good work in hip hop culture. Something fun you should definitely look up is old school. The term video vixen. I like to use that term. But it's not just the video vixen. But let's just start with the dancers, right? Because you can't have a video without a dancer, right? So people like Rosie Perez, I think, is an important person in hip hop history. Rosie Perez, um, she was on Soul Train, and she was a choreographer for the big hip hop TV show with the Wayans brothers called In Living Color. It is the show that actually produced, gave us people like Jennifer Lopez, right? J Lo was a dancer uh, on the show In Living Color. But Rosie Perez, her fashion, her style, her sort of her Latin influence made it to mainstream TV. She was also in a lot of Spike Lee's movies. You could hear her little voice, Mookie, come on, Mookie, that kind of stuff, right? But she's a sweetheart. But but dancers, right? Hip hop dancers were, and sort of launched a lot of people launched a huge career by being a hip hop dancer, and kind of put on other folk as well. But they're not only dancers, right? You also have, how brothers want to have the pretty girl in the videos, right? So especially in the 1990s and 2000s when videos were huge. In many cases, videos was bigger than the song. The brothers had to kind of stroke themselves by having some of the finest women allowed, right? And once budgets got bigger and productions levels soared, there was a new wave of video vixen, not just the girl on the street corner, but the professional women like Melissa Ford, who ended up working for BET later on after her period. So look her up. Corinne Steffens, right? We She's very popular. Wrote a couple books, tell-all book, talking about all the brothers who she had been with. Her nickname, no offense, it's just her nickname. Look it up. It's not me. Superhead, right? Which next lecture we'll talk about sex and sexuality, and sex as agency and sex as power. But Superhead, no, I didn't name her. She named herself, or she was called that herself. But Corinne Steffens was a big name in hip hop videos, right? Buffy the Body, right? How could I forget her? I almost forgot about her. Buffy the Body. So look those people up, right? Melissa Ford, Corinne Steffens, Buffy the Body. They're all known for their appearance in videos. They highlighted a sort of a glamorous aesthetic, physically just, you know, their lure, physically really, kind of brought them attention. And they represented sort of a shift, I argue, toward a sort of hyper stylized and heavily produced, if you will, portrayal of women in hip hop, right? Now, VF Vixens, is very debatable, right? On the one hand, these a lot of these women were objectified for perpetuating um, sort of mm, objectifying imagery, right? Bodies, right? Buffy the Body, right? That kind of stuff, right? And women's and men's use or play, right, with women's bodies, right? And so people kind of was criticized, especially feminists, oftentimes criticized the male producers and male studio heads for propping up these women and objectifying their bodies for the pleasure of men, right? Or for the word they use, the gaze of men, right? You watch the videos when one brother wanted to watch the sisters, right? And so this male gaze that a lot of hip hop was focused toward. That male gaze that I told you in the story about a little Kim, right? When I told you that story, right? But on the other, so that's one side, right? Women were criticized for perpetuating sort of that sense of objectification. Then you also have like, man, they were capitalizing on opportunities, right? They can make a living, they can gain fame, they can parlay that into other stuff, writing a book, getting on TV, right? Acting, right? Other business deals. So it depends on kind of how you look at it, right? But I think it's important to kind of think about in closing with that part. I think it's important to think about there's a spectrum, the gamut. Um, some of the video victims felt empowered, controlled of their image, while others clearly they did feel exploited and commodified. So I'd be curious to know your thoughts about video evictions, but you have to look it up, know what they are, see a couple of videos, think about the concept, and the body as agency and the body as exploitation. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in my next video for, for the last week of class. But that's something to think about, right? But sort of understanding the evolution, or even understanding the perplexity, gets us to appreciate the many kind of dimensions um, of females in the game, right? So we talked early on about. I think I kind of wrap up. Well, I got a couple of things here left. Um, Roxanne Shante, Queen, MC Light, foundation, right? As the '90s kind of come around, MCs kind of diversified their style a little bit, right? Diversified their content, even kind of diversified the way they presented themselves, right? So I got to get into my girl Lil Kim, right? And there's a reading that you'll be doing in your reader. So it's on written page 2-71 in the back, right? So in the written page 2-71, right? It's an older article, but it's important. Elaine Richardson is right down the street at Ohio State. She's a professor of communications there. Powerful sister. She has an annual hip hop conference. It's pretty cool. Um, but people like Little Kim and Foxy Brown, I mean, they bust on the scene and they sort of boldly embrace sexuality and fashion, both in their lyrics and their visuals. They kind of move away from the MC Light, you know, Queen Latifah, Afrocentric, more conservative styles of the 80s. Even the sort of Roxanne Shantae's kind of like down with the homies, you know, just one of the homies kind of thing. But they began to step on the line, Kim and Foxy and others. Um, they started delivering rhymes that, you know, was braggadocious, right? Hard, right? Hardcore, right? Name of Lil Kim's album. You might have saw the news the other day. Lil Kim's verse in All About the Benjamins was identified a one, some sort of award for the best female rap lines in history, rap verses in history. So if you haven't heard it, go listen to All About the Benjamins, um, Puffy, and the Little Kim line. And wanna rumble with the B, huh? Huh? Go ahead, put the X on the whole family, right? Um, but yeah, check her out on that article. But anyway, her album Hardcore that I talked about with the one that you know the outside where she's laying on the white, inside she's laying down with the little things that she got on. Um, but the hardcore album still, and I think in my next lecture I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the hardcore album sort of flipped the script, if you will, in terms of a traditionally male-dominated narrative about sex and money, and maybe effectively talked about a double standard of gender, right? What men can do and what women can do. And why can't Lil Kim do what Lil Kim do, right? But then you got people like Lauryn Hill, right, who comes on the scene with the Fugees. And, her approach is rapping and singing, her consciousness, and she got critical acclaim. Won numerous awards, won a Grammy and all that. But, she was introspective, socially aware, not really relying on sexual themes or gangster themes at all, right? Sorry, I keep looking up because of the Golden State game. So, but then obviously I made reference earlier to Missy and Missy's videos and her playful lyrics and stuff like that, right? Go on, get your freak on. Can you work it? Can you work it? Put the thing down, flip it and reverse it. That kind of stuff, right? So 2000 was cool, right? You added Eve and who's that girl? Na, 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 na. Trina, right? Oh my God, Trina, right? You gotta love Trina and that Memphis crew. Slip and slide. Debrat, right? Chicago girl, ended up going down working with So Def, Jermaine Dupri, and them. But Eve was a Rough Rider, right? She was the first lady of the Rough Riders, right? And I'm sorry, not Trina from Memphis, Trina from Miami. Sorry, Trina's from Miami. Memphis was what's my girl name? Not Rod Digger. She from New York. Memphis. What was the popular one from Memphis? With all them, I think of her name in a minute. Cause she changed her name now. Anyway, um, yeah, Trina was a diamond princess, right? And the brat, her. Um, then you move forward to about 2010. 2010, you have people like Nikki comes through, right? Nikki's huge, right? A commercial juggernaut, like took over the airways, right? Her multiple personalities, high octane deliveries, pushing the boundaries, right? Then you obviously a little bit later in the tens, early, you start people out like Cardi B, Megan, right? And they start scoring number one hits after number one hits. Then you got socially conscious MCs like Rhapsody, right? One of my favorite, who continues to sort of lock into this rich lyrical tradition, introspective hip hop. And so, in many cases, this is how today's female rap scene is so robust and wide as ever now, right? Because there's a sense to which all these sisters have come before have set the foundation since the 1980s and especially the 1990s, right? So we think about today, right? We're thinking about um, the rappers, producers, DJs, executives. They're more visible than ever, right? Cardi B, like I said, Cardi B made this out. Even Doja Cat, right? And they sort of they just frequent the top Billboard stage now, and and I think that's not as important, right? But I think challenges still remain, right? In terms of how women get paid, touring, endorsements. Obviously, misogyny in lyrics ain't went nowhere, right? And many female artists still confront, you know, sexist treatment and double standards. But I think there's a case for optimism. I think when we see like female led record labels, we see them on TV. Women in hip hop are sort of used their creative mentorship program. One of my dear friends, Tony Blackman, out of New York, she's one that a lot of old heads look to as a godmother. Um, she's a powerful spokesperson for the culture. Um, but I think, and if you turn on the radio now, like you that's all you hear, right, or sisters, right? There's a lot of women in hip hop, right? So I don't know, but I'll kind of wrap up this part. If you think about it, women have been a part of hip hop's sort of DNA, their makeup from the from the start. Not only not just side characters, but central contributors in rap music, in production, in DJing, dance, entrepreneurship, and business. Women, their journey has been marked by breaking barriers, innovating sounds and styles, forging and claiming their space in the industry that often try to overlook them. I think from the pioneering spirit of Roxanne and Queen to the chart, you got chart shattering folk of Nicki and Cardi B, like women continue to rise in hip hop history. I think as I close and as you reflect upon this lecture, I encourage you to explore more deeply. Listen to a couple songs, classic albums of MC Light. Do a little research on Deb Antney. And if you don't watch the Love and Hip Hop series, um, watch the videos of Missy Elliott and look into you know hip hop vixens like uh, Buffy the Body um, and Corinne Steffens and look into them. Or obviously just look at Rosie Perez and you'll probably recognize Rosie just from movies and stuff. But if you do that, and I ask you a few questions at the end of this that can help you to kind of force yourself to do it. But if you take this part seriously as we close the semester, do a little work here. I haven't been overwhelmingly tough with you guys at all. So, take these last two lectures and these last two assignments and do a little research, do a little watching. Turn on you on your phones anyway. Just YouTube some of this stuff and get a visual of some of the stuff that I'm talking about when I throw names out there. Okay? Can you do that for a brother? Can you do that for a professor? More so, can you do it for yourself? Right? Learn something. Take something home about the history of this thing. Right? And so let I think if you do this, you'll be able to see the vast tapestry of female talent that has shaped and continues to shape hip hop. And we can talk about this personally, but I thank you for giving me these few minutes, and I'll see you in class.